the two big lies in life.
Yeah.
KTM's ready to race, which is their slogan,
Yeah. Lie.
and
Check.
I've got a headache. On a boat. Do you know that Lonely Island song, On a Boat? You know Lonely Island?
Yeah. It's true,
Okay.
by the way. Like, having
I
spent quite a bit of time around boats, like I watch people lose their minds when they're on a boat. Not necessarily mine per se. Just it's like people just can't help themselves. Anyway, what were you gonna say?
No, look, it's quite a thing. I think that having a yacht is up there with, a jet and a couple of other very aspirational things in life.
I don't know. I think you should do it because the love of sailing, not the love of being on a boat, because it will test you. Speaking of which, I put my plane on the market yesterday.
Okay. And what's the plan? To get another, or just focus on your other hobbies?
It's more about, I think, child rearing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
It's just. I mean, I love it, and it's with a lot of sadness. But I think a few things. One, if you don't fly regularly, it's definitely not safe. And the second is, geez, that thing can burn money here. I just walk past it and I get poorer. It's like every 6 months it's going to have a big the interim year. It has this like kind of checkup, and then at the end of the year it has this massive thing called the annual, where they just rip it apart and put it back together again to make sure it's not going to fall out of the sky. So between the last two of those, which they will definitely take some money off you for the privilege of doing those checks and the annual. Between the last two, I didn't even fly it. 0 hours between the two. So anyway, that's it. But I know I'll pick it up again. I will definitely pick it up again later. But for now, I think I've got to be a bit more reasonable with my time. How are you doing, Tony? All good?
Yeah, they're definitely phase of life hobbies. I naively got into motorsport in the beginning of the year, and I was like, this isn't that expensive. I come from mountain biking, and motorbike and a mountain bike bizarrely are about the same price. You're kind of looking at about $10,000 for a good mountain bike and $10,000 for a good motorbike, and I was like, okay, I anticipated motorsport being more. I'm now, this was February. I've seized 2 motors. I now own 3 motorbikes because, the first one I bought was probably not the right one. I then, resigned myself to the fact that I needed 2, one getting repaired and one riding. I bought a second one, and 3 weeks after buying it, I seized another motor.
Look, I'm no expert, but it doesn't sound like these motors should seize. Are you sure? Is there some operator error?
No, so it's an interesting discussion. So absolutely, but KTM as a company has gone from $3 billion in revenue to $1 billion in revenue.
Really?
And
is that the market shrinking, or is that them mismanaging their brand?
I think both. So I think that there's no doubt when interest rates go up, disposable income goes down, and discretionary spending is the first to go.
I mean, it's literally the point of putting it up. Cool off the economy. Terrible process, yeah.
But that accounts for maybe 30%, a 30% reduction in revenue. It doesn't it doesn't mean that your revenue is divided by effectively 3 or 2. So what's happened, and Chris also has a KTM, and a bunch of friends, Jacques, who this one as well. And so what's happened is KTM being a EU company is under massive pressure from the European Union to lower emissions. So what they've done is they've taken a 2-stroke motorbike, which is, as old as the combustion engine. And they've had to fuel inject it. So they've dropped the carburetor. They've had to do fuel injection. They've had to inject the two-stroke separately from the petrol. And they've gone from a company which designed racing machines to you take the seat off a KTM, and there are 3 ECUs, the injector pumps, there's a whole bunch of things. And like any company that enters tech for the first time, or deep tech, your consumers become your test. Your consumers become your beta customers.
Yeah, exactly. And just because you're a big business, which they're not necessarily, but just because you are doesn't mean you can do tech. And I'll give you the good example of that. Which car manufacturer has ever built an even half decent in-car entertainment / sat-nav option? None of them. It's terrible. They're unusable. They are unusable. On my car, they built on the GP, the sat-nav GPS. They got so clever with it, and it goes heads up, and then it shows you virtually. It superimposes, so it brings up the camera, and then it shows you where you need to turn with it. It's absolutely unusable. Like, I don't know how many people walk past that and said, "Oh, that's fine."
Yeah.
So I'd imagine, imagine they're probably having a bit of that. That this is not their core competency, and they're just not getting it right.
Well, this is the subtlety, and it's easy to criticize companies like Google and Apple, and I do.
Yeah, we do it every week, by the way, on this podcast.
But there's tens of thousands of people in Apple's, if not hundreds of thousands of people, looking at the subtleties of user experience, great design, great experience.
Yeah, exactly. And KTM, firstly, they don't have that many people. They probably don't even have that many customers. But what they do have is people that know engineering from the more physical side of it, and that's what they're focusing on, their core competency, and the rest just muddling in the dark. I had a KTM, I had a 990 Adventure when I lived in Dubai. Oh yeah, I mean, that bike's capability was probably 20x mine, I would say, at the time.
Oh, great.
So we used to go out into the desert and up into the mountains, Hatta Mountains and all that. I mean, unbelievable. But there's a few things you have to do. Number one, you needed the Touratech gel seat was the first thing to change. And the second was to put the touring screen on. Also, it was just unrideable. But once you had that and a couple of other things, unbelievable.
Well, Jacques, our friend, said to me the other day, there are 2 big lies in life. KTM's ready to race, which is their slogan.
Yeah, lie.
And I've got a headache.
Oh. Okay. Well, that's probably right. So I think we have Chris.
They've lost me as a customer. I ended up buying a French brand called Sherco. They've quietly been coming up. They've got some great sponsored riders. Their bikes are literally ready to race. And the guys who ride them swear by them. They've stuck with the carburetor. They've really stuck to their guns with this.
Yeah, for sure. And that whole thing about let's go and make the motorbike manufacturer responsible for global warming is just such bullshit, right? I mean, if you were to go and look at where emissions come from, you could take, I don't know. I mean, even automobiles, I mean, it probably has something, but it pales in comparison to where the real carbon is being released. Anyway, let's not get into that. It's some red meat for you, which we will leave.
Yeah, let's not Taylor Swift bash, because she has been bashed in the press recently about her private jet and her 200 flights in the last calendar year in her private jet.
Well, definitely she was chartering her plane out for some of it, you would imagine. But anyway, look, the one thing I would say is that sailing is the ultimate hybrid, right? Because, sure, is an engine in this boat, but most of the time we're got the sails up, and so there we go. I'm an eco warrior.
Absolutely. Look, nuclear is the solution. And, the fact that the companies like Germany, under pressure from wokeness, shut down their nuclear reactors only to buy fossil fuel is, the ultimate sign of, wokeness breaking something that was working.
Yeah, not just them, everyone. Look at the US. When did the US last build a nuclear power station? And all those celebrities who back in the day got onto this, they had this, like say no to nuclear power is bad, and they all got onto this thing. Like they should bring all of them out and get them to explain their actions. And by the way, China has not had this problem. They are going full steam ahead in terms of their and the technology has just got so much better, which is internet. And in the Western world, there just wasn't enough innovation happening around it, because obviously there's so much regulation and legislation, and it's quite difficult. But in China, it's just got so much better. Like the types of kind of meltdowns that have happened before, they just don't happen. They can't happen in small pebble bed reactors. They, by their nature, the more they overheat, the more they close down. Like it's just, yeah. I mean, we've missed
some top level numbers here. So the last nuclear reactor built in the US was $16 billion. China are building nuclear reactors for $2.5 billion.
For sure.
So part of the problem here is so what's happened is a whole bunch of special interest groups have emerged. So you can imagine, Debbie, marries a billionaire dies. Debbie has no children. She then starts a cause and says, my cause is going to stop nuclear energy. So as soon as, and Debbie's long dead, as soon as somebody applies for a license, the special interest group that Debbie's funding, and there's a whole bunch of social studies PhDs that can't get jobs anywhere else, on this, and delay the process for 5 years, and incur millions and millions of dollars, if not tens of millions of dollars, of legal fees.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know. All right, okay, let's leave Debbie. We have Chris who's going to join us, going to give us a bit of, should we bring him on?
Yes. So, most of you have heard us refer to Chris. I don't think anybody's seen Chris, but, Chris's day job is as a business analyst in PPT. And I think that there's like a handful of people who are as passionate about AI as Chris. And most of them work for OpenAI and Google and places like that. So welcome, Chris, to the pod.
Thank you, everyone, and hello to Invisible Hand.
Yeah, say hi to our 3 listeners.
Yeah.
Very happy to. Chris, what do you got for us?
So I've got a demo of some AI in action and just how we're using it as assistance for PPT. We've been going through a bit of a journey developing sort of AI chatbots and agents, and just take you through the history before I get into the demo. So we developed a web bot, which was just a GPT-3 chatbot that we put on our website that would tell visitors to the site what PPT is about, just company information, that sort of thing, just sort of a taste of what AI is compared to a normal, the traditional chatbot. That we then started playing around with voice and multi-language agents. So this PPT poll was the first iteration of that, where it was built on the backbone of GPT 4.5. You could speak to it in natural language. It would respond as if it was a person, but it would just be a very similar thing to the chatbot, where you would talk to it and it could respond to you, but no real information apart from like some of the information we trained it on about the company. We then took that one step further, built Echo version 1, which could make inbound and outbound calls. It was trained on the company documents. It had sentiment analysis, emotional detection of the caller, and it was just a single agent, just a single GPT-4o agent that would speak to people on the phone. We then took it, developed that, and put in a back end. So Echo could then make calls to Outlook, to our CRM system, HubSpot, add customer details from the call, take structured data. But it was just, and then move that conversation to WhatsApp. The reason we want to do that is just WhatsApp is maybe an easier interface for everyone to work on, but it was just a basic WhatsApp integration. And then we used Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Sonnet for that. The great thing about PPT is we don't have to stick to one technology. If there's something better, we can use Anthropic stuff. And it worked a lot better than OpenAI's GPT-4 for the being aware and the responses. Then came along squads. So you could now put multiple agents together, have one agent pass over to another, and they would share the information in real time. And you probably wouldn't even know you're being transferred to an agent unless we changed the voice. So that was the next sort of iteration of things and where it was going. There was a few other developments that came out in the recent months is conversational pathways, which is more like a security question where specific structured data had to be given to the agent before you would be passed on to another agent. So you would have these siloed data sets within the agents. So they couldn't access one another's data sets unless you pass them over using that sort of structured data as a security question. The next part, which also leads into that, is agentic RAG. So basically an agent has its own data set and they can search those specific vector stores themselves. So multi-agents, multi-databases, and the benefit of this is that you've got a high a high retrieval accuracy, and you've got a low latency. So it's also a little bit more secure. So that's when we developed this Ari, which I'm going to go into the demo, which is a WhatsApp agent, and we use him for multiple things just to assist us in our day-to-days, and it's can do multiple function calls. It's got multiple agents behind it, various different databases, and it uses the various LLMs. So the main one we use is GPT-4o, but for some of the sentiment analysis and structuring data, we can use GPT-4o Mini, which is a lot faster, and it just cuts down on costs and things like that. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll jump straight into the demo.
Where is the compute happening? Where are you hosting these?
So it's all happening on a make scenario, but the compute happens in the OpenAI API. So all the agents are built there on OpenAI, and then it's just web calls and webhooks and that sort of thing to call the data backwards and forwards from the various functions.
Very cool. So that's a hell of a roadmap in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, so maybe, this is about 6 months, and our core hosting platform is Azure. So our company data and all of that resides in Azure, but we're not deploying AI models ourselves. We connect to external AI models.
Sure. Okay, makes sense. All right, let's get into the good stuff.
Cool. So this is just a demo on Xero, which we use as a accounting platform. And the idea was just, can you access documents in WhatsApp using Xero? So an example here is we can say, can you give me the invoices? So I'm using a demo company from City Limousines, which is a company in this demo. And then I'll take you through the process that it's going through. So this is the process. So on the blue on the left here is the webhook. So that's collecting the message from WhatsApp. We then go through a threads function. So every time you message this agent, it creates a new thread. So the idea here is to keep the same thread throughout. So when you message this agent again, your thread will be referenced and your conversation will continue. So it'll have the history of your conversation. So if you speak to it in a week's time and you message it, it will remember everything. So it's a bit like speaking to someone, you know, a real person, and they would hopefully remember you, right?
Yeah.
It's digital, so it should stay, you know, months and into the future. It then goes through our two OpenAI agents, one as a messaging and assistant, so that has a custom prompt on the OpenAI API, and then a structured data agent. So that takes that information and puts it into various structured data that we can then use for the rest of the process. So if the information is not all there, it'll send it through to WhatsApp to ask for more information. And then this is the second part of the threads, which is storing the thread. And then it goes through the zero function, which retrieves the invoices, the information, the customers, that sort of thing. And then a few different functions on here just to get the right information to you. And if there are multiple invoices, we've got an iterator to send those multiple invoices back to you. So hopefully, so here is the complete request for the detailed invoice from City Limousines. So those are all the details. And then I go, send me the invoices. So there's functions and filters here. So if you don't ask for the invoices, it won't send them to you. So you won't get bombarded with all of them. Also, there's a structured data for date search. So it'll understand if you want the latest ones or if you just want the first one or a date range. So that'll put the date range to 0. Okay, so it's given us there, but it hasn't. Okay, the live demo guard's on with us. Send me the invoices from Smith, which is another, and that'll go through the same thing.
Yeah, but it does illustrate a point, though. I mean, these things are incredible. They are absolutely incredible, and they can drive, productivity and efficiency and everything else. However, they also do have these problems. Yeah. Like they are incredible 90% of the time, and 10% of the time they do this, right? And that's I think that it's a good, it's very impressive, the solution you've built here. But it does show that there is an underlying problem with the models at the moment, is they're just not quite there,
So I think what we're demonstrating, and it's a good point, David, and you're 100% right. So, as an industry, we are we're dealing with two inherent problems. The first problem is accuracy.
Yeah.
And the second problem is latency. And both of those are getting better.
They are.
But but the point, the perspective,
and there it is.
There it is.
Yeah. So perspective is also something we need in this journey. Now, what we've my perspective of this is, what would the alternative process be? In my world, that this alternative process would be, I don't want to log on to an ERP system. Even as a small company, we've got 5 or 6 systems, and I don't want username and passwords, and I don't want to learn those systems.
Yeah, sure.
So I've got a human on top of that system. So I would have to email that person, and that person would respond to me. And being the MD, they would probably respond quite quickly. They would definitely not respond as quickly as Ori. And secondly, they also could make mistakes. They could have, there could be an communication error. So, but in comparison to my alternative, Ori is materially better.
Sure.
Then what we're seeing is, and I on message, I sent you another press release from Klarna around them turning off Salesforce and Workforce and a couple of ERP systems.
Yeah. And
so the other question we ask is, Chamath from the Invisible Hand has started a business called 1890. And his philosophy is, he wants to build 80% of the functionality of enterprise systems at 90% of the cost.
No, other way around.
Or the other way around.
Okay, yeah, 90% of the functionality for 20% of the cost.
However, I think that's fundamentally flawed, because you and I have both built systems, and it's that last 10%. It's actually not even
sure.
10%. It's the last 2% of functionality that gets you cracked up. So my approach to AI is 100% of the functionality at 90% of the cost. And the way you do that is you know, typically ERP systems are priced per user, per named user or concurrent user. So if Ari is a user of my ERP system, and he's able to process multiple threads, and he's able to do it 1,000 times quicker than a human, that's how I materially achieve 90% cost reduction in my ERP system for 100% of the functionality.
Yeah, sure, for sure. And then while you just, I think good points, very good points. While you're doing that, obviously Chris was continuing his demo about setting up the, you know, I mean, it's working. There's no question about it. I mean, it is. You can see a huge productivity increase from this.
Yeah. So yeah, in the background, I asked Ari to set up a meeting for me at 2 p.m. and then it goes ahead and sends that. And then it has Microsoft Outlook, and then I set up a Zoom meeting request there as well. So I put the link. And then just from my side, every time a new meeting is set up, I get a WhatsApp from him with the details, the name of the person, their email address, their company, and what it's about.
Yeah, very good.
And then we've got one more, which we use integrated into our HubSpot. So this is on our sales WhatsApp group. So I just say, I mention Ari, and I'd say, who is our contact at Sun?
Yeah, you're going to have to block all of this information.
Yeah, some serious GDPR. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm just asking for who the contact is and when we last had the engagement.
And where would it be pulling that from? So that will come from.
So I'll show you. So this is the basic part of the front end there, which is the WhatsApp message to a messenger to an agent, who then goes and through a function call to here. So it gets the call, the function call, and splits that depending on whether it's a contact or an object, so a company or whatever it is. And then it goes through to the webhook there, back to Ari, and sends it back. So you'll get this. So we'll get the details there. And so without having to log on to HubSpot, or if any of the execs want to know, they can just at Ari on our WhatsApp and get the latest information.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So where would it have seen the last contact? Was it looking at WhatsApp for that? Like, or do you have a CRM program that captures all of your multi-channel communications?
Correct. So, so on HubSpot.
HubSpot is our
HubSpot. Okay.
Yeah. And you know, this is a good example. You know, so HubSpot costs us. It's a small business. It costs us $1,000 a month. So it's not an insignificant amount of licensing, and additional users will cost more for us. So, you know, as we scale, you know, the benefit of me not taking $1,000 licensing to $10,000 licensing is very meaningful as a small business.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So the other great thing about Ari is that he's multimodal, so you can send him transcriptions. A lot of people would send me a voice note, so I there, and you'll see that comes up, and Ari then goes through another function, and he can understand. He takes the audio file, transcribes it, and then puts it through into our, and comes back with a transcription. So the next flow is to put this through into a task on HubSpot. So whenever I get a voice note, that'll make an automatic task on HubSpot.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. and having the user interface through WhatsApp just makes a ton of sense. Because especially if you want to drive adoption, because people are doing that. If you build something new and new portal and interface and whatever, especially if you're in a large organization, the chances of getting people to actually go and do something on it is very low. But if they're going to a place like WhatsApp anyway, continuously, you're onto a winner, you know.
And the great thing is you can use the same number, so for multiple different functions. So you can have one number for Ari is, you know, the sales sort of thing. The other one could be technical support. It all depends on who's asking. And it's WhatsApp, so it's encrypted. Information stays pretty safe.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You've got all of that that's there already, so that's pretty good.
Cool, Chris. I think we're almost out of time. Is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, that is it. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, well done. Very good, Chris. Very good. So, yeah, very impressive. You know, this last week I spoke to the Microsoft team, the retail and consumer goods or whatever they call themselves team, invited me to come and address them, you know, around some of the stuff that we were doing. And one of the things that I said to them was, there's really magic in these models. There's no question about it. You know, if you think about it as a human race, we have never had any intelligent interaction has always happened with another human being, right? This is the first time in the history of mankind that there is another entity that can interact with us that is not human. Like I guess that's artificial intelligence, right? But anyway, the point is you know, this is not just a small, you know, improvement on where we were before. Like there is something seismically that's changed here. But what I did say was, that's what I said to them. I said, you know, we're going to start building the systems and we got to use the best models. But there's three things I said. Number one, the models have to get better. They have to. You know, being right 90% of the time or 95% is just not good enough. It's okay for now because people expect that there can be some hallucinations and latency and that, you know, getting some stuff wrong. But ultimately, the models have to get better, and they will. And then the second I said is we've got to make a big distinction between training and inference. Like this idea that we're all going to, any AI work that we want to do is going to be on these big, super expensive, you know, compute data centers. It's just firstly, it's not needed. It's not cost efficient. In fact, you'll see with Apple, I think some of it's going to happen on the device itself, you know. So that, you know, especially if you're just doing text and whatnot, I think once you get into kind of image, you know, interpretation is probably a little different. And then the third, as I said, we need to figure out exactly where the value comes. I mean, we're in a high, you know, if you think about evolution, you go through these periods of high variation, right? Like exploding variation. And then 99% of them die off and 1% is, you know, it thrives in that environment and then move forward. We're in that high, you know, variation stage at the moment, but we need the commercial evolutionary you know, stage to kick in and to see what comes, because the bill is coming. I mean, as I said, at the absolute least, we've got an NVIDIA-sized bill coming our way, because, you know, all of that money that's being spent and these build-outs of these big training centers and whatever else, you know, data centers for training, you know, at some stage that bill comes downstream, right? So, you know, I think quite soon we need to start getting to where commercially this starts to make sense for us.
Yeah, so you know, I agree with everything, and you know, you know, this last week, OpenAI, you know, as much as both of us have quite disdain for some of the shenanigans that have played out at OpenAI, you know, they still employ, you know, call it 1,000 of the smartest AI people in the world.
Yeah.
You know, and they're approaching $100 billion valuation.
Yeah.
And they released their latest model, which is an iteration on GPT-4o. It's 401. And that's a massive evolution. And effectively what it's doing is the simplest definition I give people for transformers or large language models is a next word predictor.
Yeah, sure.
For very short, say there are about 50,000 words in the English language that we commonly use. And, effectively what a large language model is doing is paying attention to the question or the ask, and it is then predicting the next word and the next word and the next word. And that's got some inherent flaws in it, because it can not take its answer in consideration and will not self-reflect. So effectively, the new model from OpenAI, which I'll just call one for now, what it will do is it will generate the answer and then think about the answer, and then correct the answer and give a thoughtful answer to the user. So, in one way, it's a massive step forward around accuracy, but in another way, it's a massive step backwards around speed and latency. So, and that then talks to your second point around different models for different purposes. So, the one model is going to absolutely be the go-to model for research, physics, coding, mathematics, things like that. And then, there will be a whole bunch of other models, that are going to do editing and all the other things that we experienced. Then, my final comment is around value, and you and I have this conversation often, because we both in the business of adding value. Everything we do, we need to add value to our customers. And the way I'm starting to think about the problem is not necessarily whether AI can add value. It's more around the change management around how it adds value. And the reality is that for the first time, we're having a broad white collar automation revolution. We've got subtleties, where we've given people tools to do their jobs better, but we've yet to have a complete revolution in white collar work. It's very easy when you go to an assembly line and you add automation to assembly line, because this part used to be manufactured this way. We are now adding automation. It's getting done cheaper, faster by a piece of software, a piece of hardware, a robot, whatever it might be. It's very, very different when you work with a white collar worker, because the measure of productivity is so intangible. White collar workers are thinking, they're strategizing, they are attending meetings, they are having cool, coffee conversations, they are meeting suppliers, they're going on conferences. So, there's not this one-to-one ratio of how we measure productivity.
Yeah, but all of those people at some stage, when push comes to shove, there should be some measure of value. Like if they work in marketing, it should be, sales growth, category growth, whatever it might be. Ultimately there's a lot of noise around being an employee and all the things you do. I think these models are going to show us in time what really matters and what doesn't. And it probably turns out going to a conference in Vegas and doing hookers and blow for a week is maybe not as necessary as it is. But that's an interesting point. You get to the stage, 4.0 and 01 and whatever else, GPT-4.0 and 01, like they're good. They're very good, but they still make mistakes that humans wouldn't make. Then you would be very disappointed if an employee made some of the mistakes that they make, two things can be true at the same time. They're incredible, but they're also, prone to. So you think about all of that, and then you think, well, what happens when we get to 5 or 6 or 7? Because then when somebody comes to me and says, I need another I need to employ a category marketing manager for this or whatever else. At what stage you say, well, just deploy a a custom a custom model, because then all of a sudden you've got there's probably expertise that exceeds the employee that would come in. You can give a company access to all the company data, sales. Otherwise, it's like that stage will come, and I think then it's the disruption happens pretty quickly from there, I would say.
So I think my view on how this is going to play out, and you raised a very, very important point around the infrastructure build out. We've got NVIDIA that has very, very quickly ascended to I don't even know exactly where they are, but they're certainly in the top 3 most valuable businesses in the world, and that's coming from revenue. That's coming billions and billions of orders. And recently, I heard Jensen in a financial interview, and he said about 50% of their business comes from data centers. So we know that build out's coming. My question back to you is, if we see these models very suddenly, 100x better, what impact will that have on society?
It would devastate it in the short term and improve it in the long term. Because why would you employ people? Why?
100%. But then and we agree on this. So I think that the chance of us seeing in the next 12 months a model which is 100x better than our current models is very, very high.
I think that's overly optimistic.
Okay, so I think we overly and optimistic and pessimistic in different areas, but I believe that I believe it's probable.
But the problem, why? I don't know, because the one thing for OpenAI, for all of their shenanigans, one, they do great products, so we're going to give them that. But the other thing they do very clearly is that their naming convention is such that, and they're so strict by it, unless there is a step change in the model, they don't call it 5. And there would have been, if there was a marketing team in charge, 4.0 and 01, the marketing would have been saying, call it 5. It's it's so got all these extra features, and they really stick to it. Like, until there's that step change in capability, they don't call it 5, right? And we've been on 4 iterations of 4 for a long time now. Like, I just, because 100 times better is not 5. 100 times better is, well, I don't know. But anyway, continue.
This is the challenge. So what we're saying is that the infrastructure which the current models were built on, is probably 100 to 1,000x smaller than what's being deployed today.
Okay.
Nobody's built AI clusters the way Microsoft, Google, and X have done. So they're building out these clusters which are 100 to 1,000x bigger than the clusters which the current generation models are being trained on. So so that's one input into my suspicion around this growth. Then the other issues the other factors are, well, the invisible hand now comes in, capitalism comes in. You have to be accountable for this deployment of capital. And then competition comes in. You've got a whole bunch of super smart people working on the same problem at the same time. And my experience with technology is you have these absolute breakthrough moments. And, GPT 3.5 was a breakthrough, or GPT-3 was a watershed moment. And I think we've had, to your point, iterations since then. My sense is that we're on the brink of a breakthrough moment in AI.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Or maybe it's going to take 10 years before we see that 100x, you know?
It's possible, it's possible, but when human beings have focused on a problem, whether it's the space race, whether it's nuclear energy, whatever it might be, whether it's electricity, when human beings have focused on a problem, an exciting problem en masse, I don't know of an instance where we failed.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. Look, and everything is being thrown at this in the kitchen sink, so yeah.
Then the second part of this, and now we're entering a little bit of a dystopian kind of future. So you said something very interesting, and I agree with you. I think it's going to be highly disruptive. So now we're sitting, and you in a position, we're both in a position of making strategic decisions. You're on a bigger scale than me. Can you imagine that conversation at an executive table or at a board table around, well, this technology is available. It is able to reduce my workforce by 100x or improve my margin or reduce my selling price. What do we do?
Yeah. For sure. But most businesses are not thinking that way.
And my sense is that unless you're doing that, unless you're playing out these scenarios, you're going to be caught flat-footed.
For sure. And I'll tell you why I think that you're right on this. Is at one side, I did when I was talking to the Microsoft guys, somebody interviewing me, answered some questions, or gave some questions. I kind of opened it up to the group, right? And I said, guys, let's be honest, right? I think the value I can add to this room is to show you and to help you figure out how to sell this to your customers. So let's pull back the kimono and let's have an honest conversation. And all of their questions were around capital allocation and influence. How do you get the CFO on board with this? How do you make sure that the naysayers are that they don't get in the way of the progress? How do you do all of those things, which is incredibly telling, right? Now we're obviously quite fortunate, and we don't have those issues due to our structure and autonomy and whatever else. But it was so clear, like their questions weren't around how do you make your strategy stronger with AI or whatever. It was all around capital allocation, and clearly that's what they're running into. And you can imagine a bit of headwind in the economy, high interest rates, inflation, this, that, and whatever else. So all the guys that they're working with, and by the way, like these are big businesses, right? They're not gonna waste their time with their moms and pops and whatever. I mean, they're big strategic, like retailers and whatever else, which was quite telling, and I'm not sure I had all the answers for them on that, but I think that kind of proves, I think, your point, and that those companies, there is no doubt, even if the models aren't very good now, at least you build out the infrastructure and the solutions, whatever else, and to change from models is fairly easy. Software delivery teams and whatnot will tell me that understating how difficult it is, but it's actually not. I mean, that's probably just more testing than anything else. You can swap these models quite quickly. So even if you have a model that's okay at the moment, once that model becomes better, you plug it in and you're off to the races. Like there's no throwaway work or very little. So I think it's quite you got to be in it to win it, right?
Well, I think that what we're going to be faced with is, at its core, what does innovation mean, and how many people? So what's very telling to me around the Microsoft questions that was that they're treating this as another capital allocation conversation. So how do I get the CFO involved? Because the CFO is typically of the stage gates in capital allocation, and for me that's completely the wrong conversation to have. The conversation to have is, who's regarded as real innovators inside an organization.
Yeah.
And how can I start having a conversation with this innovator to that when we are ready, and you're 100% right, we are not there yet. We're at the early stages, and kudos to you that you and I had this conversation quite a long time ago, and you're one of the few global enterprises with AI solutions that have seen the light of day.
Yeah.
So the question, the real question I think we should be asking is, who's going to be around the table with a voice when we have massive disruption?
Sure. Yeah. Well, exactly. That's probably a more productive question to ask than how do you stop the CFO from getting in the way? How's it going, boy? You know what I mean? My brother's just arrived, so we got some guests coming on board, and we're off in a bit. So, look, I probably need to wrap quite soon, but I want to give you. I think you make some good points. I want to just two things. I was watching some of the stuff that was coming out of LA in terms of the all-in conference this week. I have two quick hot takes on it. Firstly, Chamath is just too far away from it, that he doesn't, the value that he brings in terms of talking about technology is just becoming generalized, and its lack of specificity makes it probably not something that you'd want to put too much weight on. Like there's just this, you've got Jason, who probably doesn't have the same wealth that they do, so he's actively still in the hustle, right? Like he's investing in startups and whatever, and he's close to it, and it actually gives them, like, as hard as they are on them, it gives them a lot more credibility. Chamath, like, and that idea around like that 80-20 or whatever, like if I went and delivered a CRM program to my organization that was 80% right, I think I would be moved out of the business. Like it's just, like, especially if it's a sales driving thing or whatever. I'll say the mayhem, the mayhem. To get to 80% is the easiest of all of it. Anyway. So I think that there's a real challenge around those guys starting, they're getting further and further from it. Like his idea around like what AI is and how it can work and whatever is very it's very superficial, and it lacks any reference to the reality of the situation,
So let me, and I'll find this research for you and I'll send it to you on chat. But, effectively what the research says is that that early success of your career, your career, is a predictor that your career will stagnate. Because what you've done is you've very, very easily achieved that success. And what you've been trying to do for the rest of your career is try and replicate that. So the difference between you and I, Chamath, is that, we've been in the trenches for 20, 25 years, and we've slogged it out, and we've been in the detail, and we've succeeded, and we've failed, and we've had to strategize, and we've had to coerce people, we've had to apply for capital, we've had to be accountable for capital. And, when you look at a guy like Chamath, and he's, I've heard some very smart things come out of his mouth.
Yeah, so for sure.
He's a very smart individual, but what he is he's missing a few foundational elements for him to build enterprise software at scale.
Yeah, for sure. He's the ultimate GPT, right? Because he's like, there's some real magic there and incredible stuff and whatever else. And then there's 10% of the time it's just like, what the fuck is that? Like the last thing I want to say is I watched the interview with Travis, the Uber founder, and whereas I think he deserves a huge amount of credit for the foresight that he had. That interview was a fucking disgrace. Softballing love fest. The culture that guy built, how close he sailed to the wind, the way he treated Bill Gurley, who is arguably one of, if not the best in the business, and given him so much trust. you know, the way that he screwed Apple around, how close he came to being booted out of their ecosystem, the mess that he left there. And there's this love fest. They did not mention Dara's name once, as far as I remember. And he has completely changed that business. He's changed the culture. He's made them profitable, strategically good. Like, it's just, yeah, I thought it was an absolute disgrace.
Well, I think just coincidentally that, Travis is a good example of somebody who's trying to replicate the success. He went on such a tangent trying to describe what he's doing with cloud kitchens around moving of atoms, and he's good at digitizing. And, as an engineer, I was like this is just bullshit.
Completely. And I worked with cloud kitchens probably in the last 6 months, and when I was with that previous big multinational food business, and I worked with cloud kitchens, and the idea that they were some form of tech company is just completely not true. Not true. Like, all of our technology systems were better than theirs. Like, we wouldn't have used any of them. Their kitchen infrastructure, that's the furthest thing. It's the furthest thing from technology, Anyway, and we couldn't make it work. Like, I every which way we looked at the number, and there was a lot of global pressure to do something with them, because this was Travis and it was Cloud Kitchen and the future and whatever else, and just whatever which way I looked at it, just couldn't bring it together. Just did not work for us. Look, I think it would probably work for some. I mean, if you don't have access to to what's required to build out your own kitchen infrastructure, then maybe there's something there. But you're giving away the king's ransom to do it. So anyway, good luck to him. But I mean, the fact that Dara did not even get a mention, and the incredible work that he's done, right? Very quietly, he fixed that toxic culture and he made that company profitable. And there are, I'm long on Uber, because once the kind of the driving automation comes in fully, I mean, they're off to the races then, because the number one cost goes away. I mean, tough as it is to say. So anyway, there you go.
You and I have different views there. I think Tesla will disintermediate them. However, I think what we are seeing is, a glimpse into the back end politics inside Silicon Valley. And, in the previous episode of All In, the guys en masse pretty much took Paul Graham from YC, around some, an article he wrote, and in substance they weren't wrong, but the truth is that nobody's coming out with new principles, and Paul Graham just socialized founder mode versus manager mode, and they completely took him to task. And the reality is that Paul Graham criticized Brian Sachs recently on social media, and Paul Graham has been single-handedly involved in more startups than that whole group.
Yeah, sure. Credibility, right?
Absolutely. So, I think what we're seeing is the messiness of the human condition play out.
Yeah, for sure. And add in a bit of ego, and it's all a fun place to be. All right, my man, I got to go. I got one thing. Yacht ownership means there's always a list as long as your arm of things that need to be fixed. I got some guests coming on board shortly. So, look, good to catch up again. Let's not let it be 3 weeks again. And then have a good weekend. I'll see you soon. All right. Bye.